and Stephanie's Rock Show back on Instagram and YouTube. And I'm super excited because I have my first comedian on the show since I started. This is Mean Dave. Thanks for coming on.
Hello. Yes.
Hi. I like
Thank
the
you.
rock. I think comedians and dirt bikers go hand in hand with rockers. Like there's a little connection. We're all a little bit unstable and fun.
What brought you to that conclusion?
I have interviewed hundreds of people at Metal Mayhem, and it's kind of like a big festival in LA where you bring together rock stars, comedians, and motorcycle guys. And I realized we're all really funny and crazy. So I don't. That's my take on it.
I've heard of it. I've never heard of comedians going there. I don't, but maybe I don't know them. Me personally, I don't even drive an automobile, so I would go
I love
nowhere.
it.
Yeah, I don't. I stay home. So
How do
yeah,
you get to your shows?
wishful thinking. Uh,
You just teleport?
little fingers crossed. No, no. I drove for many years, and then I got a second DUI in 2013, which kind of led to I don't know how much if you were able to hear my act on the train too much, but I've been in
I
12
was
step.
bartending, unfortunately.
So you didn't, yeah.
So
I've been in 12-step recovery for 10 years, and I mean you can tell I've done drugs. It's pretty obvious. And
me too.
uh, yeah, so but I kind of kept running into problems with the law and my personal life. So I got it. I kind of had the last straw after getting a second DUI in 2013, and then got into recovery. And then the first time, my first DUI, I kept my license, and I just remember how much I was putting it all at risk. And then this last time, I really kind of I thought about it, and I remembered I never wanted to drive since I was in high school. It was kind of a responsibility that was imposed upon me to go, because my mom needed me to pick up my sister she went to a different high school, and I had to go pick her up from that high school. And I was like, why can't you just take public transportation? But my mom was scared of that, so she made me get my license, made me buy a car, and then I went and did it, and then everything all of my problems, not all of them, but I mean a lot of my problems with the law centered around an automobile, and I wasn't blaming the automobile. I was just like, I never wanted to drive,
Yeah.
and and there's a lot of
It
anxiety.
really is a privilege, and not a right. And I have made some mistakes with driving as well. I'm no angel. Do you think you were mean, Dave, because you were drinking and had an automobile, and now you're nice, Dave, if you're not
Not at all.
driving?
No, the name came from my a band I made. I've been called mean a lot just because of my I wasn't like gratuitously honest, but again
Blunt.
during the drug times, I had an LSD epiphany, and I realized that I was not being honest with people. That I would
Okay.
hide a lot. So I needed I felt that in a character effort, I needed to be more honest with people about things. And then that kind of snowballed into what I realized was a defense mechanism of keeping people at bay by sharing them my most honest, harshest thoughts. And so there were times where I definitely came off as mean. I would dare say I was mean. But then that was just what I was called, and then I started a band, and I needed a stage name, and there was a movie called Mean Frank and Crazy Tony, and my drummer's name was Eric. It was just a duo, and I thought, oh, Mean Dave and Crazy Eric, that works. Like, it's kind of
I
cool.
like it.
Yeah, and I play a mean guitar, so that's kind of where it's centered around. And there was a character in that band that then I tried to transition into comedy, and it didn't work at all in comedy. I had to completely retool it, and my drummer quit, but I kept the stage name anyway. And I was like, you know what? I made it this far. People fuck up my last name, so I just ran with it, and it gives me a little license in case some of my jokes do come off a little harsh or something. So You know.
Yeah, the expectation that you could be kind of mean. But and I understand that. I think when I started out in radio, I wanted to make people laugh. So it didn't matter if it was at someone else's expense. And now
Mm.
that I'm older and I'm a parent, I'm actually a little bit more soft and kind. And I'm like, oh, is that going to hurt somebody? I probably shouldn't say that, you know? Or we would have porn stars on Playboy Radio and
Oh
it
wow.
was just say whatever you want to them. And now that I'm older, I'm like, are you okay, honey? Do you need to get out of this? Like, do you want to talk? You know, I've just completely changed from kind of blunt to like, oh, is this the right thing to say or not?
Good point. Yeah, and that it's funny. I never considered myself mean as much as I would defend myself against who I thought was mean and would engage those kinds of battles. It's not like because I got I'm not a fan of bullies, but then I grew up in an area where it's like I ended up becoming friends with some of those bullies. There's there's bullies in life everywhere, and I think it's my dad was one of my biggest bullies growing up, and one of the things I always laugh about that he used to tell me was like, Dave, you're gonna have to learn in life that sometimes you just have to deal with people you don't like, and I was like, no shit, you know, like, look
Yeah,
who my
yeah.
father is,
And you
and
are who you hang out with. That is, it's true. Like you
I
really
agree
do
with
rub
that.
off on your circle and your friends. And I like to hang out with people that are cooler and smarter than me and
Hmm.
that inspire me, like that have so much going on. And I'm just like this little person in the room where I'm like, what? So wait, so I love you just performed on the River Fox train.
Yes.
Do you have like what shows are coming up next for you?
I'm actually. I mean, you're in the Sacramento area, and I actually the next couple weekends I'm in Sacramento. I this weekend I'll be on Friday. I'm doing a show at there's a VFW hall, and I'm forgetting the number for it, but there's a VFW hall. Me and my friend Nina G just got added to at a 6 p.m. show. But the show that we really push people towards at Stab Comedy Theater. It's a popular little it's a little theater that's very creative. They have a lot of little like real niche comedy shows, and it's in downtown Sacramento. And we're there at 9 p.m. on Friday for the show Warm Takes. So I
Okay.
hear kind of a cool little show. And then and Saturday I'm doing a bunch of private shows. And then the following weekend, April 12th and 13th, I'll be hosting at Laughs Unlimited in downtown or in the old Sacramento. So come on down to
Nice.
that. Got a great lineup there. I think DeJan Tyler, who's a really good comic, he'll be headlining, and I'll be hosting. So it'll be a good time.
That's great. You guys got to check that out. I know I've seen you also at Punchline years ago.
Oh, that's what you're
It's just
saying. That's right.
a
Yeah.
long time ago, but I was like, me and Dave, it was a great lineup too. I laughed really hard. It was a fun night. Maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't go out that much anymore.
That
I'm
was
kind of
that was
boring.
probably that was probably for Dan Soder. He was
I
headlining.
think so.
Yeah, because
I
I host.
go honestly, if I go out, it's a comedy club because I like to laugh or a band that I love that has a chair. I don't like to stand now that I'm older for too long. So if there's a chair, I am going to that event.
Yeah, I don't make it to Sacramento Punchline. I make it there like I'm supposed to be there like once a year. It depends, and then I've only been there two times in the last 3 years. I was hosting for Dan Soder in 2021, and then I hosted last year for Big J Okerson.
It was
And
Big J.
oh, it's Big J. Okay,
It was
great. Yeah,
Big J. He
I love
is
Big J.
so raunchy and
Oh, he's
crazy.
great.
And I forgot,
I love Big J.
me and
Yeah.
my buddy Jim went to see him. Ah, man, we ended up drinking for a little bit after the show. That was just I forgot that
Yeah.
that was that night. That was a while ago. Okay, and so you have a YouTube show. I want to get this right. Meaningful time with friends. How did that come about? How did you guys start that?
Oh, it's funny. Those guys, those are you say you surround people or whatever that you want. These are my oldest friends from growing up. Some of them. I'm very blessed that a lot of where I grew up, I had a kind of an eclectic group of friends that all were kind of different, unique, whatever. Most common interests we had were music and or a sense of humor that was kind of dark and cynical. But it wasn't by any plan. I just ended up kind of staying in touch with a lot of my friends most of my friends from junior high. These are guys from junior high, and out of that pool of friends, there's some people that are some. I'm the one who went into performing more than anybody else, and they all have kind of different, unique paths. And when the pandemic hit, I ended up resurrecting my YouTube. I had a podcast years ago that was on a pri on a or on a it was on FCC free radio, which was like you rented studio time and you yeah, it was a live streaming podcast, so we recorded live, we were aired live, but it would make a podcast that you could listen to at any time. And then I did that for like 2 years, and then me and the owner had parted ways. And then I ended up kind of starting, it's all on my YouTube channel. I started what my friend referred to as a video suicide version of it on YouTube, where the very earliest of it was called In the Meantime with Mean Dave. And it was me interviewing uh, either random friends or comedians, but it was kind of like a hangout session with a static my camera on my laptop and just recording it with one shot, no editing or nothing. And some of them are entertaining. I enjoy them all because I make them kind of for me. But it was just an experiment to see if if any of it was entertaining. And then a buddy of mine, he approached me about he wanted to actually like kind of produce one with me that was like a little more had more editing and more conscious.
Multiple cameras or, an actual script, I don't
It was
know.
not even so much a script, or I mean, it kind of, but like we wanted to produce a more comedic one that was like had intention, if anything. And I kind of liken it to like it was a very garage. I didn't even know about the show at the time, but watching it in retrospect, it's a Wayne's World dumbed down, no budget version of like the Eric Andre show because it's kind of trying to imitate a late night show, but it's not. It's very dumb at all ends, and we played around with it. And Eric Andre's way more. It's not. I'm not even comparing it to Eric Andre, but for what my humor is, which is very lazy and kind of just throwing it around, whatever. It worked out really good, and so we did that for like 7 episodes, and we had fun, and then we took a hiatus, and then we never came back. And then
You can't take a break. Or like I know, I took a break from radio and I got into real estate and I realized I wanted to get into podcasting. And for the last 2 years, I said I was going to start a podcast and I
yeah.
was looking for a co-host and I was thinking of all these excuses. And then I woke up one day a couple
Mhm.
weeks ago and I was like, no, I'm just going to start it. I'm just going to start it. And if my neighbors watch, cool. If my old radio listeners find me, which thank you to a couple of you that have held on, then awesome. But by the way, I love Wayne's World and I like an easy show with kind of
Yeah.
in your face comedy where it's not super planned out, low budget. And I
Mhm.
also like Tim and Eric,
Yeah.
where it's just
Yeah.
literally one camera and you're
Yeah.
kind of improving. There's just
Yeah.
not a set tone. Do you improv at your shows at all or
I try to do some of that. I mean, it's like I definitely have my jokes, and my jokes are written primarily from improvisations on stage. So it's a little once you start getting your material down, it's like it just becomes a little harder to risk all that. So you got to like remember like, hey, I need to think about ideas that I feel strongly about and talk about it on stage and risk bombing for segments or bits or whatever to try and find something funny in an idea that can become a new bit. But after those that wave, the pandemic hit, and I was people were stuck at home, and I was like, oh, I started sharing all these old episodes of all my old stuff. And the guy who was my very first guest on the video, meantime, he was like, hey, why don't you make some new ones, or have you thought about making any new ones? Like, we're not doing anything right now. And he was like, and I thought about it, I'm like, oh, he's absolutely right. And so I started making my own in the meantime with Mean Dave, editing it myself from my laptop, doing it kind of like a single testimonial style. But then I started having guests once I became familiar with Zoom. And the next thing you know, I ended up making more during the pandemic and the aftermath of the pandemic than my entire run over the last number of years that I did the
that's
other.
wild.
It was cool because it gave me something to do. We were stuck at home because I a lot of people in the comics in the pandemic were all freaking out because obviously our shows all dried up, and these are comics that were making a living or making a level of income at comedy. It might not have been their main job, but it was definitely one of their side hustles, and it was my primary job at the time, and I wasn't that scared about it because I was like, oh, worst case scenario, I go get a job at Amazon or some shit. Anybody who's like, powering through the pandemic. And but then in the very first week, I was invited to participate in a Zoom show for a private audience where they were tipping us, and
Oh,
I made the rest of my rent that from that show and learned about Zoom. And then I had some. I was just like, huh. I'm like learning the Zoom app. I'm like, I could easily adapt. Like one of the podcasts I used to do with a friend of mine. It was like not a regular one, but I liked. I thought we could adapt it and make a regular podcast like a weekly or something, and then also think of other things. And I adapted to Zoom really quickly, and cultivated like kind of what people do with Patreon and all this stuff now. We cultivated an audience, and they were a generous audience of people that were able to donate money, and we ended up running shows, yeah, through that. And then I was doing other people's Zoom shows, and then there were outdoor shows. And next thing you know, I was making just as much money, if not more money, in the pandemic as staying at home a lot than I was going out and doing shows.
I'm super
So
jealous. During the pandemic, I built a bar in my garage and got really drunk and had my friends and neighbors over and drank the whole time. So I did not start a podcast or get back into
you should
radio or
have made that
anything.
the
And that,
podcast. That was the podcast right there. You could
that
have just got drunk at home with your friends. I
I
guarantee
did hire a stripper to come to my garage during the pandemic to perform for my neighborhood. But I
you started an
didn't.
OnlyFans. What are you thinking? There you
You know
go.
what? I always say this too. If it was around when I was young and I was 18, I would have been all over OnlyFans. I don't judge those girls at all. But
A lot of people would have. Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's great. However you make your money, make your money.
Yeah.
I got babies, so I can't do that
So
to
do a lot
them.
of them.
I
So,
know. And I'm judging that. I'll be honest. What I am
a
judging
lot
is
of only moms.
if you if that should be where we share our grocery list at the store. But if you're a mom, you got to hide that stuff because you don't want your sons to be older and getting teased.
It's weird. I mean, I follow. You'd be surprised. I follow. I'm 47, so I've followed enough. Like in the age of social media, I have followed some of my favorite adult film stars and seen them have kids who have become adults now. And
Same. I lived in Hollywood and my roommates were porn stars. And so I see them now and they're like vegan Christian moms in the suburbs that are
some,
like,
some of
you
those.
know? Yeah.
I have to say I feel very sad. There's a one that just recently lost her son. He died in a motorcycle accident. Her name's Austin. I'm forgetting her last name, but that's her actor. Her name's Amanda or whatever. But it's weird. It's weird when you reach a point where like you follow adult film stars and then you know their lives well enough to where like you're sad for them when family real life hits, and it's like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah, even like people I've interviewed in the music industry, I knew them when they were insane and wild and they were having lots of girls on their tour bus and now they're like married and sober and their kids are going to Catholic school. And so it's cool to see
Morning,
growth,
yeah, it's the morning
you know,
after.
or
Yeah,
they're dead,
yeah, or they're
not to be harsh, but like a
dead.
lot of them have gotten sober or the porn stars and rock stars are dead. So it's like you got to choose your path. I'm
Yeah,
not ready
and
to
so
quit.
one of these episodes, I invited all my old friends because when we were learning about Zoom, we would have these hangout sessions. These are like friends that I've stayed in touch with, but they all didn't stay in touch with each other because they were closer friends. As a matter of fact, they all like lived together at one point and other stuff. And I'd stayed in touch with them, and so I had this idea of like, hey, why don't we all get together and have a hangout session on Zoom on a Friday? And they all liked it, and so I did it, and we had a couple sessions, and it was a good time. Like everybody just hung out, we're bullshitting old stories and stuff, and then and the thing is, these aren't just like friends of mine that I'm like I just shoot the shit with. My friends are like people that I'm genuinely inspired by. They're interesting people to me. They're funny people. That's primarily what drew me to them, was their sense of humor. I didn't get into comedy because I was Mr. Funny Guy. I got into comedy out of a need to promote a band, And but I knew that I can be funny. I knew that people laughed at me, but I wasn't like trying to be a comedian. I wanted to be. I was being a musician. I'm a musician too, and I'm not a fan of like trying to be funny. I hate that shit. I hate like, hey, aren't we wacky and blah blah blah. I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
And these guys are not that. They're people that like genuinely have this perspective that I think is it may not be that unique today, but back then and when we are growing up, it was, they've always been interesting people to me, and just also they look at things a little differently, and I've always liked that. And I like our conversations. So I asked them, I'm like, hey, would you guys be willing to do one of these hangout sessions as an episode of my in the meantime? And some agreed, some liked it, and some were like, yeah, I'm good on that. So the ones that agreed to do it were the ones actually I was hoping would, because they're good at, they have a gift of gab. And the other ones, they'd be good too, but it was just they're not performers as much.
Yeah.
So we did that episode, and I really enjoyed it. And then time moved on. We ended up having hangout parties, kind of get-togethers in person. And then one of them actually moved away. He moved to across the country, and but at the time I was like thinking, because we have a text thread, where we all chat on there, and these guys still can crack me up out of no, like I'll be sitting somewhere, not even thinking about anything, and then there'll be like this whole conversation they have on my phone, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys are fucking jackasses. And I'm like, these guys, we should just have a podcast. And so that I
Yeah.
asked, you want to do a regular podcast? Really, it's just an excuse for us to get together and hang out and bullshit, and we'll throw topics out there, but it's really just an excuse for me to see their faces and talk to them. One of them, we don't see his face because he has a job he's trying to protect,
Yeah.
but the so yeah, and they all agreed, and we've been doing it now almost a year. It'll be in May, it'll be a year. And we don't, I just put it on YouTube. It's on my YouTube channel, YouTube slash at Mean Dave. You'll find it. Meaningful Times with Friends. And we don't put it out. It's like I try to do it we try to record it and have it out every 2 weeks, but sometimes we slack a little bit, and it's just life's busy. So
Life.
yeah,
I love
it's just
people that think out of the box and that have raw talent,
it,
and then like I'm doing this for fun too. So I'm having my friends, like I said, if I go to work and I see someone that's funny or has even a cool business or something I don't know about, I'm like, can you come on? Because I want to learn about it. And I know someone else might want to hear from you or learn from you. So I am hitting up some people from old radio days. And so fingers crossed that I'm getting some big bands to come on the show. But scheduling
cool.
right now is kind of crazy. But
It's
thank
always
you
tough.
so much for taking time out of your day to stop by. And I will definitely have to check out your YouTube channel and let me know if you want me to pop on and say something stupid because I'm available.
Cool. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, it's not that hard. I'm on my phone, or I was trying to do this on my laptop or whatever. And like I said, I got my daytimes free. So this is really, pleasure's all mine. It was funny when you invited me to do this, and I'm like, oh, well, you didn't see my act though. So I could have just as easily bombed my dick off in front of everybody at the on the trains.